And first of all, do y'all have a presentation in front of you? So, okay. So you can kind of see the outline of the first few slides of kind of what the land we're talking about. But basically, after kind of giving an overall review of the land that was available, we're land developers. That's what we're here for, and we saw this as an opportunity to kind of reinvigorate an area that had previously kind of fallen by the wayside, and we identified this roughly 560 acres, used to be referred to as Marshall's Vista. We call it Shoreline Ranch, and so there's a Shoreline Ranch Boulevard there too. But with me today are Mark Brown. Mark's with MBS Development Services. He's our consulting development manager here. Also, Gene Luco is with RVI. RVI is our planner on this project. You all are probably familiar with RVI. They're a big company here in Austin, in the Austin area. Primarily work on master plan, landscape design, that sort of thing. And then Steve Robinson with Allen Boone Humphreys Robinson, who's a consulting attorney for this project and the development agreement, which is what we're here to talk to you all about today. So with that said, I guess we could kind of start going through the slides and start that. Oh, thank you. Again, we're calling this project Shoreline Ranch. Not exactly sure how large it'll be at the end of the day from a unit count standpoint, but it's pretty much 100% residential development. We do have one small commercial site that's kind of up near Loman Ford Drive. Is it the Ford?
Sorry?
He aims it at the computer, doesn't he, to advance?
You need to, it's wireless.
Okay, I skipped one, I think. No? Okay, here we go. So highlighted on this slide is again, the 560 plus or minus acres that we're calling Shoreline Ranch. It borders the hollows to the north and what's been referred to as Marshall's Harbor to the south, also Montecino. It's a variety of development that's occurred down to the south of it. And it's adjacent to Marshall's Point, which is out on the end of the, kind of on the waterfront there. So that gets us oriented. The high school site is kind of at the southwest corner of the site, and that's really the border of the property that we're planning out right now. This is a conceptual bubble plan that kind of highlights the major thoroughfares that are and the residential collector streets that would be. I don't know what happened there. There it goes. Also, and y'all have this on your slides, it shows some of the street contours and also basically the sections of land that would be designated for residential sections within the development. I might ask Gene at this time to come up if there's any questions about how this is done. We can address them. Track D is one that's it's very high elevation and it's very difficult to develop, but the idea with that is that we would have some sort of single-story patio product, garden style, that sort of thing. It's got some nice terraced topography to it that lends itself well to one-story homes, but again, that's going to be an engineering and planning question.
On the tract O, high density, what is?
Yes, I said track D. I'm sorry, track O. I should have had it open in front of me.
On the western
Yeah,
side.
Tract O, yes, that's correct, sorry. The blue is where the existing water treatment plant is, adjacent to the hollows. From a connectivity standpoint, We have been in communication with Josh, also just recently met with the superintendent of the school district, but trying to acquire a right-of-way to establish a primary entrance to this community. Currently, it comes through Shoreline Ranch down off of Loman Ford, where Boggy Ford tees into it, and we don't control or own any of that, but we think we've had some positive response on the right-of-way acquisition. We've kind of had our engineers look at it, and that's what you see in pink, basically coming in on the north side of the high school. And we've had conversation with the school district as well about maybe having a joint connection there that would have a future signal light to protect the traffic coming in and out. And so that's kind of one of the city currently has an easement there as well for their elevated storage tank, which is right north of the high school. And then the green, of course, are the the coves that are developable land, also the drainage corridors that make it to the lake. We have a limited amount of water frontage, but you can see the purple. There's one at the end there on the purple where we do have a little bit of waterfront, enough to probably amenitize that. Assuming the lake doesn't drop, tremendously, we should have some nice water access there, and we'll figure out how to amenitize that, and then planning another amenity there, primary amenity at the central part of the where the entrance comes in. As I'm sure you all know, that this project, again called Marshall's Vista, originally included a golf course, 18-hole golf course, Gary Player course, and larger lots which didn't sell, and so we're planning to reconstitute the whole community and bring something that we feel will sell, that will make sense, that the consumers will want to buy, and hopefully that will provide some long, consistent growth here in Lago Vista.
Okay.
Any questions on this slide? Okay.
The only question I'd have you looked at any type of exit or road out of the north end of this development?
Yes, we have. We
Okay.
have, and that would be a connection to Destination Way.
All right.
And that we would, we think that makes a lot of sense, and without talking to the fire marshal, we would think he would think that it makes a lot of sense, so we'll absolutely, that would be in the plan.
As far as safety is concerned, that's the only way to go, because anything that would consume shoreline, the high
Right.
school area, that kind of thing, even with the two exits, you're still talking about all that being in the same area and all having to go on the Loman Ford.
Right,
If you had a fire or something through that area,
you bet,
you're going to need an exit out of the north end.
you bet.
Okay.
Good point, and yes, indeed, we've even met with the adjoining landowners and discussed it with them, so.
Okay.
Mayor, if I might, I anticipated at some point y'all asking that question, do we have any? I have 44. You guys don't want me to go through that tonight, I don't think, either now or later. What I plan to do is to submit those questions in writing, and y'all can see them, and we can try to get answers. Let me just leave it at that for the time being.
I'm sorry, I didn't,
I've got a lot of questions and concerns
okay,
to include the plan, which we're beginning to discuss, which might create some issues for us legally. So I don't want to go through all my questions, of which I have 44 tonight,
okay,
either now or later. And I'm going to submit them in writing, let you guys see them, and we'll see the responses before we actually decide on something.
Okay. All right.
so we'll move on here.
Yes.
Gene, why don't you talk about some of the amenities? Maybe kind of landscape. I'm going to have Gene speak to this, kind of the ideas behind it.
I'm Gene Luca with RVI, Director of Planning in Austin, Texas. Our intent for this was to show ideas of hill country views and architecture and vernacular for open space, for the amenity centers, and for the trail system. Because, can I go? Because on the, does this have a pointer? No, okay. The green connections for the amenity center, the purple one on the center of the project at the terminus of the intersection, and the other amenity location down by the water are connected by that drainage area. And so we're really thinking about how do we connect people through this project, through these open spaces and these green belts, and have a trail system along here, not only be along the roads, but also through these drainage ways, so we could take advantage of the natural feel of the community, the natural vegetation, and work with it. And most likely anymore that a highly improved trail is not the way to go. It's more of a mulch trail, a nature trail through there, so that way you don't have to do large amount of grading or earthwork through there. You're just trying to leave it natural and have a means of connection for the community and for the residents. And like, for example, between parcels D and parcel E, you would have, even though the parcels connect, you would still try to have some kind of pedestrian corridor that comes between those tracks as that lot layout is designed. So that way people can get through there and have a loop trail system, because you've got to take advantage of the natural amenities of this land. And what it is the topography and the natural settings. So
Will you be clearing paths?
the paths would be a clearing, but you would do it, only what you do is park up the cedars, and you wouldn't work to try to take out any trees. You'd work around them and so forth the best you could. Because we've worked in the past, like at Steiner and other locations, where you work with a specialist who comes in and lays the trail out themselves, and they do a very natural job. And any parking up you do of trees is what you use as the mulch for the trail. So you're not bringing things in, you leave everything and recycle everything on site. So it's a real natural process for that kind of thing. So you've got an amenity here, and the land's the amenity, and the view's the amenity, and the vegetation is an amenity, and you got to work it into the site plan as you come along. So that's really an important factor for this.
So you developed a trail system for Steiner Ranch?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I've been on that.
And that is one that's strictly, when you get off the main road, 90% of it is mulch.
Is mulch,
And that way it's all done from any time, and it's rejuvenated over time from any trees that are taken down during construction. That for home building, then those things and it's recycled that way. So it's a good way of always not having to bring mulch in and keep reusing things on site, what you've already developed and so forth. Anything else? Mama?
Well, I guess my question was, you're gonna clear it wide enough so people don't get hit by branches and.
Well, you'd park up the trees, yeah, because you'd have to park them up, yes, because otherwise you can't get through. So it'd be just a process, and depending on how long ago the cedars have been cut and what their age is now, some really grand ones could be really nice when they're parked up and provide shade. We just get the lower branches taken up so you can walk without clobbering your head on the bottom of the branches and so forth. Yes, sir.
This may be a minor point, but how wide are these paths going to be?
Usually, the nature trails are usually about 6 feet wide or something like that. They're not very wide because you want it to be natural. You don't want to, like if you have a grand boulevard someplace, they can be a concrete trail could be 8 to 10 feet wide, and that's not what this is. That's a more formal urban setting. This is a more natural rural setting for the trails through the open spaces.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. Okay. I'm going to ask Mark Brown to come up. This is the track basically outlined here, but we can have a little discussion about the existing infrastructure and conditions of the site.
Good evening. Mark Brown is my name. The historical conditions pretty much were dominated by the golf course in the attempt to I guess, developed the whole project at that time, which was not completed. And on the surface alone, there's a lot of remnants from the grading and the tee boxes and obviously the clearing. And then there's some areas where the roads were kind of rough cut but not finished, and so there's been some erosion. We also noticed in some of our preliminary inspections that the drainage facilities were not completed. There's portions of the water system that are in the ground and are pressured, but there's other portions that are not to be found. The same is true with the sewer. So in general, I really want to say, without getting into too much detail, right off the bat, one of our first tasks will be to bring everything up to the standard that it should be pretty much right now. Because when you get out there and you look, you would expect the guardrail to be done. Or if there was a proposed, culvert structure for 4 barrels and there's only 3, you're really not sure exactly how. But we're going to have to go in and bring all of that up to standard. And then we'll move forward. That primarily is the major tract requirements. Your collector roads, your connections either to the north or to back to the Shoreline Ranch. Once that's done and up to speed, then that kind of forms the constraints of the pods to be developed into lots. So in the beginning, we have to bring the golf course land into the development, bring everything up to current standard, regrade some of the golf course areas, and get it all so that it's properly connected. And then we're going to start with the development proper. And that goes back to when Gene was showing you the concept plan, the various pods that he gave letters to, right? They all are pretty much formed by the collector roads that are there. And the 2 exceptions would be the entrance road from Loman's Ford, which we believe is very important to give the project an identity and to relieve traffic. Right now, that's planned to be 4 lanes. However, capacity-wise, if it was a collector with 2 lanes, it would function. But we want to beautify it and make it a little bit bigger, at least to the main center of the property. Then you talked about this before, but that second connection to Destination Way, we believe that's important as well, and I think the fire marshal's on our side with that. So historically speaking, I guess there's few other minor things, well, not minor, but a few other things I should mention. There will be a booster station required for the high ground. Currently, the pressure level supported by the elevated tank is not quite sufficient, so we'll have 1 booster station for the high ground. And then on the sewer side, it appears that we'll be putting in sewer pump stations pretty much for the whole project. That's just the way it looks right now. So subject to final verification with Eric and some of our final, planning, I believe that's how it's going to end up. Anyway, if there's any questions, I'll take care of them.
I wasn't going to ask a question, but here's one I hadn't thought of that came up. Are you all familiar with the agreement the city has with the landowner up there where you've got the proposed signalization Rancho Cielo?
Well, let me address that very quickly. The concept plan is not intended to show you exactly where that road's going to go. It's a concept location, and the primary driver of that is there's one intersecting private road that if we can go past it 125 feet or so, then we would like to move the road closer to the school.
This has to do with the agreement that the city made with the people that own the land adjacent to Loman, where the hill is.
Okay, I'm not sure where you're talking about.
That's why I'm mentioning it. The city has an agreement about where your proposed the road that comes out where you've got proposed signalization. You're familiar with that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
Joel and I
that's
had
fine.
that
That's great.
conversation. We have
That's
the contact,
Okay.
but that's where Mark's going back. That's the concept of
Yeah.
going in, and it has to be tied in.
Okay.
I think we actually talked to that property owner 2 weeks ago to start having that dialogue.
Okay,
Okay, I didn't understand. Yeah, that's right.
thanks.
Okay, any other questions on the historical? Well, there might be some later, so I'll be here anyway, so thank
Okay.
you. All right, well, let's move, let's move into the next slide, which relates to what I was talking about. Get it?
The batteries dropped out when I.
There it is. There it is.
Got it.
That did it.
Okay, that's.
Nothing but the
That's
finest.
the mud. I think it'd be the next one.
Yeah, that's.
The onsite hard cost is our first one.
Try the next one and see. I think that's what it is.
No, the one
This
is,
turd.
the one he had up.
Oh, okay, that's,
That's
there. Yeah, that's the one we have.
yeah,
There you
Is
go.
our first one.
Yeah.
okay. Okay,
You can go whatever.
I think we'll just start here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the one
So,
that gave us the presentation.
Why don't, you want to give them the overview?
Yeah,
and
sure,
buckets, and
sure.
then I'll-
Part of this, we are asking the city to consider the creation of a tax increment reinvestment zone. And it may be best that we start off kind of describing that, which case I'd ask Steve Robinson to, if everybody wants to have a little, understand the concept of the TERS real quick, and then we can talk about the costs that would be financed through the TERS. Does that
That's fine.
make
That's
sense?
That sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. Steve Robinson with Allen Boone Humphreys Robinson. We are a law firm that basically works on the use of special districts to finance public infrastructure. So most of our projects begin exactly like this, where we're trying to figure out for areas, how do we deliver public infrastructure. We have really two vehicles that we are talking about utilizing here that will work in concert with each other. We often do these in concert, particularly on in-city projects. A part of what we are facing is the vast majority of competitive sites or sites that are being developed in unincorporated areas with the use of special districts. And we are an in-city track, and that in-city track obviously means that we have the city tax rate plus, and that means that there is a limitation on the tax rate of the district that we can utilize. So we are trying to overcome that difference between the vast majority of our competitors. We have, with your permission, we went to the legislature last session and had a mud district created that overlays this track. Part of what we are doing is requesting your consent for us to utilize that district, but it actually only provides part of the solution to the problem. The other part is how do we overcome this tax rate limitation, and that is through the use of a tax increment reinvestment zone. A tax increment reinvestment zone is merely an area designated by the city for the reinvestment of incremental increases in tax revenues from that area into that area to pay for public infrastructure. There is no money that is upfront paid by the city as part of a tax increment reinvestment zone. It only takes increases in value from that property and reinvest those in that area into public infrastructure for that property. The only way that works is for the developer to go in and construct the public infrastructure and to develop the new taxable value, in this case, almost exclusively residential homes, and create the new taxable value in that area that gives the ability for that area, those new taxes to be reinvested in that area. So to give you a very simple example, if you have a piece of property worth $1 million and you add $10 million worth of new taxable improvements, the incremental increase, you have a total of $11 million. The city continues to receive 100% of the taxes on the original million. And then on the $10 million of new value, the taxable, the tax increment, that portion is available for participation by the city and the county and any other taxing jurisdiction that that collects a property tax on that area to participate. What we would end up doing is solving for what participation is necessary. And there are really kind of a few factors that go into this. How much of the infrastructure are we trying to pay for? And we'll have Mark go over that. In large part, in this instance, it's driven by the very significant limitation that we have in the tax rate. In Travis County, MUD districts can have a combined $1.20 tax rate. And here with an existing tax rate approximately 65 cents, for feasibility purposes, our district only has 55 cents available for financing public infrastructure, whereas down the road in Cedar Park and other places, there's a total of $1.20 available. So that places a limitation, and obviously the only option for a builder is they could put those costs into a lot price and sell a lot for 30 to 40% more than a lot down the road in Cedar Park. And I can assure you, all of the national builders are not going to purchase a lot that's 30 or 40% more expensive to buy the exact same lot. And so that is really the problem that we are trying to solve. So the factors in the TERS that we will be looking at are how much infrastructure needs to be paid for through the TERS. Secondly, getting the county participation in the TERS, because that allows them, they are going to be the beneficiary of this growth and collect new taxes. And therefore, ideally, they are also a participant in helping to pay for new infrastructure that's going to serve that growth. We will be looking at the length of time that's necessary for the TERS and what the participation levels are. And in general, the way that we like to structure is that there is cash flow from day one on a net basis to the city, but a portion of that increased tax rate is being utilized to help fund on a reimbursement basis, the developer. A couple of things I want to point out. With this, new growth pays for itself, meaning that the developer is the one who puts in the infrastructure, takes 100% of the development risk, and constructs the infrastructure at risk of being reimbursed. If the development does not occur, the developer doesn't get their money back. And so both the allocation of risk, we believe is appropriate, that risk is on the developer, and the expenditure of money and who goes at risk. Again, this is if the developer assumes the risk of new growth, you continue to receive all of the taxes on the existing value, and then you get a portion for the time period of the TERS on the new value. The TERS and the MUD will work in concert with each other, meaning the MUD will have its own tax rate in addition to the city and county tax rate that will pay for a substantial portion of the infrastructure, and you see those and I'll have Mark go through those costs. And the balance will be of the infrastructure will be paid for by participation by the city and the county in the TERS. But for those costs being incurred through the TERS, these lots would not be financially feasible to sell with the competitive market. There is one other aspect of this that we will talk about. If in the event the city does not have water and wastewater capacity available to serve the track, the developer has agreed to advance the funds to construct that additional capacity. And as is done in most cities, if we are constructing your facilities for you for additional water and wastewater capacity, we will receive an offset from the impact fees for those dollars that we spend at your plant facilities. So those are the three components. I will let Mark first. Is there any question about how a TERS works? Sure.
Go ahead.
Or any
Well,
questions?
this is one of my 44.
Sure.
In the development agreement, it appears to be relate to a mud, and we see the term mud there, and you've mentioned mud. The city has to approve the formation of a mud, not the state, correct?
City is involved in that process.
Yeah, the city has to consent. So what we did, the process that we've been through, is we came and asked for a resolution of support to go to the legislature and pass the bill, subject to receiving the city's consent.
I thought that was a municipal management district.
Yeah.
It was the mud?
Yeah. It was actually either, and
Okay.
And just so you know, a MUD and a municipal management district have exactly the same powers. The only additional powers that a municipal management district has is they have the ability to provide more supplemental services and amenities. But a management district has all the powers of a MUD. And when we began the legislative process, it became clear that the local delegation much preferred us to use a MUD instead of a management district. And so it really didn't make it, for our financial purposes, it didn't matter. And so when we came to y'all with a request, we said it could be either, but no matter what, we've got to get your consent. It's a 100% absolute, you have ultimate decision-making of whether or not that MUD cannot be utilized absent the receipt of your consent. We would expect that consent to go hand in hand with a development agreement. Either we reach terms of the development agreement and get that consent, or we don't. Okay?
All right. I would assume that we have already had conversations with the county as far as being part of this?
Yeah, those are just beginning. We will certainly through this process be working with the county on a request. Obviously, until it is done, it is not done, and that's true for us and true for the city. And so we've got a timeline that we'll go through. But during the course of that timeline, it's where we will request what's called a participation agreement by the county in that TERS.
Question I had was the difference between a property improvement district that we have now and a TERS is the opportunity of the homeowner to deduct those taxes.
Well, the public improvement district and the MUD are usually compared. The TERS utilizes your existing city and county taxes to help fund the infrastructure. The MUD is an additional tax on the area. The PID is an assessment on the area. And I guess the biggest difference for your perspective is that a PID is not a separate governmental entity. It is only an area designated for imposition of an assessment. And that has some very significant impacts on a city, particularly a smaller city, because in order for it to sell bonds, the city must issue those bonds. And there are most cities do not want to take on that debt. It has a couple of implications. One, you've got your name on a debt that confuses your credit rating with an assessment debt. And so most cities don't like that. Secondly, and from our perspective, it is not as good of a credit. One is a tax, one is an assessment. If you're going to have the same cost, you ought to have the one that is the most credit worthy. So if you're going to pay $100, you ought to pay it with a tax instead of pay it with an assessment because it has a better credit quality. As far as deductibility, the tax bill has kind of removed that as really an issue now that we have the kind of standard deduction for state and local taxes. It is everybody, you either claim the standard $10,000 deduction or you, or if you've got more taxes than that, it doesn't really matter anymore. So that issue has largely gone away. But it would be, for practical purposes, it would be treated the same. The PID assessment, they're both a local governmental imposition, state and local taxes. I believe they would be treated the same. But that issue has largely gone away after the tax reform.
Good. That's still have a local
Here we go. But if you guys bring it up, I'm going to address it. The city, there's a PID in town. One of us lives there. The city is not taking on the debt, nor do we have any liability if the bonds are not paid off in a PID, period. If there's not enough cash coming in to pay the bondholders, the bondholders would work to get the land. They cannot come for the city, so we have no liability on a PID.
Absolutely. You have no,
Okay.
but let me, but that's not
The point you made
what I
was that
said.
we're taking on the debt. We're not.
The debt.
Okay.
No, let's be clear about this. You must sell the debt in your name, okay? So do you want to be associated with a debt? So let's talk about the real difference in a MUD and a PID, because it's very important. A MUD is a highly regulated vehicle that you must have the value on the ground prior to the sale of the debt. You must go through a TCEQ process for authorization to sell the bonds. We have not had a single bond in a MUD default since 1989 that was issued after 1989, with more than 20 billion sold. They are incredibly stable. We're selling bonds at 2.5%. Very, very good credit. A PID can sell bonds on a raw land basis with your name on it, okay? With Lago Vista PID number 1. And I would challenge any financial advisor to tell you that if that PID debt defaults, that it will have no implications on the city because you will not have to pay it. I agree, you are not liable for it, but you will have a debt that has your name on it that has had a default. I can't make a decision for you, but almost no city wants to have that on their record.
They're ahead anyway, right?
But the biggest difference is the PID allows for raw land financing and the belief that if we build it, they will come. The MUD does not. The MUD requires that it has already come and it's already financially viable before you sell the bonds.
I don't know if you were on the council when the PID was approved.
No, not yet.
What you described has happened. In other words, we've been told by multiple financial advisors about the PID that was created, and it's okay. And then for what it's worth, if you haven't figured it out yet, I like PIDs.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
I got it. All right. There's a very different
Deduction that I
financial.
don't get on a PID.
Pardon me?
So I don't get to deduct anything on the PID.
Yeah, and that may be the case. Yeah,
and I'm okay with MUDs.
right, good, yeah.
I'm okay with deducting taxes.
Any other questions about the TERS?
So,
I have a
Wait.
question.
well,
Wait,
hold
ma'am.
on, it's not open to public yet.
Okay,
Oh, it's not?
No,
but I'm happy to talk to you after.
I'll let you know.
Okay.
So we're looking 50% city, 50% county.
Well,
Participation?
yeah, I don't think that we have made any formal proposal at this time. That really depends, and we would want to have that conversation. As I said, it depends on county's participation. It also depends on the length of time. A lot of that will depend upon the city's desire. Do you want it to pay off more quickly and participate at a higher level, pay off more slowly and participate at a lower level? We need to have those conversations in the future.
Mayor, we did make contact with Commissioner Doherty's office, and his office instantaneously put us with the county's economic development, finance director, and with legal staff. So they're getting together their questions. They're going to bring those back to the city, and then more than likely we'll come back to Joel and to Steve and hope that Steve can lay out the formal request for what we're going to be asking of the county to participate in, and that just came back this week.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just looking at Article 5. Article 5 said 30 years, 50%. Either way.
You don't go over that. Well, unless there are any other questions for me, I'll have Mark go over them.
Does the school district ever participate?
You know, in the old days, until 1998, the school districts were allowed to participate without it adversely affecting their funding under the TEA funding formula. Those days are over. The legislature said, and those TERSs that were created pre-1998, that has that full $1.50, I mean, they work great, but the legislature said no more. Just so you know, I mean, it adversely affects their funding formula dollar for dollar if they participate. Nobody wants to take the money from the kids. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I would like to briefly cover the breakdown on the preliminary numbers. And with Steve's overview, let me just start with this. There's 3 buckets that we've established. One would be TERS. The next one would be MUD, which is the current slide. And then the last slide is the impact fee advance bucket, and I'll go into that shortly. That's going to be exclusively for wastewater or water construction of source. So the MUD facilities, because of the limitation in tax rate, we were limited to the maximum amount that could go under the MUD. However, it falls really quite logically with what's normal. The on-site hard cost, each of the residential pods has all the infrastructure, all the paving, everything that normally goes into it, dry utilities, street lights, drainage, water quality, and you can see those listed on this slide. I think I'll just briefly run through them, but suffice it to say, pretty much anything that's required for delivering a finished lot is going to be in this list of costs. And our current projection with engineering, surveying, et cetera, is $30 million. And as you can see there, it starts from mobilization, goes all the way through erosion control, subtotal, and then contingency, et cetera. I don't know that I need to dwell on this much, other than to remind you that the 30 million is just under the maximum. So that's what takes us over to the TERS part of the discussion, which is the next slide. Let's see here. Joel, do you have it? It's up here. Oh, thank you. The thing that I want to start with here is what I was discussing earlier regarding historical conditions is primarily addressed here. Those costs are in the TERS bucket. And I did summarize them for you, and most of them I think I touched on, but in general you'll see extension of roads that were not completed all the way through the property. Those are the first few items. The water booster station is in there separately, wastewater pump station, and then we get to repairs. There's repairs for pavement, substructure, guardrail, drainage, possibly some sidewalks and maybe some other items that are related to just beautification. You get down to the utilities, the wet utilities, and I mentioned this earlier, there's water distribution that has to be repaired. There's some wastewater collection that pretty much we think is unsalvageable and has to be replaced. Some of that might change as we dig down and we find out specifics. This is all based on the best information we have now. Moving on, we expect some dry utility repairs. Y'all know it's Pedernales, and we've already contacted them. We'll be meeting with them very soon. We'll have the same situation. What's there? What kind of shape is it in? Let's go fix it. There's some golf course regrading, landscaping. There is a system that we believe is going to be necessary to take our wastewater to the nearest gravity manhole that the city currently operates. That's an off-site cost. It's going to be in the TERS side. And then probably the main one in my mind is you'll see near the bottom of that first group of headings, it says main entrance road from Loman's Ford east to Shoreline Ranch. That road will cross two really tributaries or small tributaries, so there'll be two structures required. And then the traffic signal is included. And finally, we get to contingency and then all the usual. So you can see right there, we're looking at that point, $13 million. And then we move to one item that's an on-site item that I moved to the TERS because of the limitation we have on the district. And that's going to be on-site paving, and the number is about $7 million. So if you kind of run through that and then get down to the specials, we do have 5 items that are just in my mind a little bit, they deserve to be separated a little bit. Public spaces and walkways. I know Gene addressed this to some extent when he was up here. We do plan on having very nice public spaces and walkways that would include trails for really all manner of what people like to do. You'll have some that'll probably be paved, but the vast majority will be very nice, natural. And there's the potential for connecting the trails even further, depending on what kind of arrangements we could make with the neighbors. Fencing and entrance monuments, and then we have an amenity dock planned down on the water. We did have an unfortunate thing that came up, which is some of the mitigation issues associated with the birds had not been handled previously, and we thought they had been. So we now have to negotiate that, and there's a cost in this bucket for part of that. And then it looks like by the time we generate the costs that I've outlined above, we might not have enough credits available on impact fees. And we are showing some shortfall here that we think the city would make up either with excess TERS funds or maybe some other source. And that would only be true if we end up generating a bigger credit and we have more lots to plat and that credit doesn't cover it. Does that make sense? I think that's, maybe I said that correctly. So anyway, I know there's a lot there, and certainly any kind of question that comes up, we'll answer it no matter when you ask it.
Here goes, I think this is 47. Pardon me, guys.
47? I thought there was 44.
I do, but these are new ones.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Sorry, guys. My understanding is for an off-site improvement, according to our subdivision regulations, you build a subdivision and you haven't got the pipe built to capacity for your subdivision, the pipe size gets built, you build it, and it's at your cost. Correct? And I'm getting a nod. So I don't know what we're paying you for if you're responsible for it.
Well, I'm going to say that what I did, I tried to assess the cost of the project. And in general, I mean, I've been through the rules, but the vast majority of my focus has been to try to fix what's not up to speed and then put a nice development cost-wise, and then figure out how to get it qualified in the various forms of finance. I would say that if there's a requirement that we build a certain pipe and it doesn't have anything to be offset with some of the costs that are out there that the pipe should be there, for example, then we have to make an adjustment. But I think right now, the development agreement is our proposal and our recommendation based on what we see. And competitiveness is a big part of it.
Gotcha.
Okay, there's one more slide then, if we want to skip.
Question for you.
Yes.
You work out the details for the traffic signal with the county?
Actually, I have not.
I mean, but you.
Oh, we
you'll be
will.
the-
Sure.
You'll be the ones that would.
Yeah.
It's our road. It's our road.
So we have to work out the details with the county?
No, it's our road. They work the details out with us.
Well, I've seen it both ways and sometimes both.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm just saying it, if everybody has a say in it, then we're going to have to go talk to them.
I think it depends on what section of the road, though.
Yeah, I mean, didn't we have to work out with the county for Loman and Boggy?
No,
We didn't have any?
no, it's a city street.
Okay. We just had to get Pedernales to do that. There was an issue at
Well, it's a
somewhere.
city street, so it's not a county street. I think the
Gotcha.
county's out of it, but
Well, you made
whatever.
my job easier,
I
thank you.
hope so, yeah.
Okay. Next slide, please. All right. Now, this is, I think, a pretty good estimate of where we see this issue coming up, although I know that Eric is probably going to be refining some of this in the future. It appears to us that more plant work capacity will be needed down the road. And I've estimated it at this point at the numbers you see there, 175,000 gallons per day. That's for water treatment, and then wastewater, I guess it's the same amount. That's generally to cover 500 homes. And that's based on our assumption that there's already capacity for 568 homes. Now, if we did that in today's market, as you all know, it's expensive to build, and we have put numbers in there that we think are safe. A lot of that would be dependent on your current permit standards. You know, you have to match them or do better. I think that's probably the main thing. If y'all have certain types of filters and so on and so forth, then the cost changes. But we put safe numbers in there. And I think when you add contingency in total, we think it's about $12 million in today's costs. And that would be based on the assumption there's no water rights needed. Now, that may sound like a problem, but it's not for us. If it needs to be done, we can do it. And when we get together with Eric and really refine what do you really have and maybe where is he going to be short and when, then the timing of it comes into play as well. The significance here is these are the fees. I mean, these are the advanced funds that we would like you to offset with impact fee credits. That's why there's a third bucket, and that's the one.
Otherwise, the city would normally be putting up the $12 million or whatever it costs for to expand the plants. And in this case, we would say, we would do that, we would put up the funds to expand the plants if the city couldn't, or there wasn't enough capacity.
Okay, well, I think that's the overview of the numbers. If there are any immediate questions, I'll stay up here or I'll turn it over to Joel.
I have one real quick question. Something that you said triggered a thought. You said in today's dollars, in terms of time, how long do you anticipate it taking to get the infrastructure completed?
Well, we're going to phase it, and we were actually debating this quite a bit the other day, and I would say it depends on a couple of things, but if the entry road is to be done for the first phase, which I believe, and I don't want Joel to comment as well, we would probably tie it to the timeline required for that. I don't believe there's any plant works issues initially. So for us, it's a matter of getting the entrance road done, getting connected to the city sewer, fixing the problems for those first units, whatever they are. Right? If we're going to fix the pavement, fix the water, fix the sewer, but we don't have to fix it all the way down, then our timeline is going to be quicker. And so I would say in general, I tell you what, I think for the timeline discussion, I'll let Joel cover that, and I think he'll give you a good answer. All right?
Thank you.
The next slide is the, there it is. Thank you. Yes.
And just one thing back on the impact fees, we would much prefer paying impact fees. So we're happy to pay your impact fee if you have capacity. What we're saying is, if you don't have capacity, we'll act as a banker and just offset it. So if you had the capacity, would be much preferred not having to borrow the extra 12 million and get the offset. But we're prepared to build the additional capacity, for the city. All right, next steps. Let's talk about this because you remember we're in a development agreement process and a TERS creation, process. This is not a planning process. Planning process has to be done completely separate from that. So the development agreement talks about financing and what's going to be paid for and those kind of things. The planning process will occur through the city completely separate. So what we have provided for here is assuming we can get to an executed development agreement in November. We have it on your 19th agenda, and we can get the city to approve a consent ordinance. What we would like to do is to run concurrently our process for planning and the creation of the TERS. So if you see here as we begin, and these are basically steps toward getting where we can have both an organizational meeting of the district and begin having the TERS meeting. Those steps include, as y'all have noted, we'll need to coordinate with the county to get participation in the TERS. That requires a notice to them. We have to have 2 public hearings, and then the TERS is required to create a document called a project plan and plan of finance. And that document is basically a roadmap. It says, here are the things that the TERS is going to do. Here are the projected revenues that will come. Developer, you go spend all your money to build those things that are in the plan. And if you're successful, here's how the repayment works. What you really get down to in the TERS plan is how long is the TERS, what's the participation level by the participants in that TERS, and then the developer assumes the risk that he's going to create the value on those parameters that allows him to get repaid. That TERS plan, once the initial TERS is created, the TERS board has some meetings to review what we propose and what city staff talks with them about. They approve it in preliminary form and then submit it back to the city to become a final plan. And once that plan is a final plan, the TERS can only implement what is in that plan. So if they want to do something that is outside the plan and pay for something, that they have to come back and go through a process of a TERS plan amendment and get your approval to do anything different than what's in that plan. Ultimately, our district would have an organizational meeting once they've had your consent and begin entering into similar agreements with the developer. The district works very much like the TERS also. There's no value there. There's no infrastructure, there's no taxes. The developer has to spend the money and only get paid from the MUD if that's successful. The development agreements, if you go to the next slide, development agreement very much mirrors the cost summaries that we have talked about. It provides that we're going to create, we're going to get the consent of the city to utilize the district to fund the projects within Travis County MUD number 25. And there are some technical issues about when bonds can be sold and things like that that are made a part of that consent ordinance. And we provide basically that the city allows the district to finance those things that we have talked about in the list of projects. Then in the development agreement, there is an agreement that the city will designate the TERS, that the developer is responsible for funding all of those projects, subject to reimbursability if he creates that taxable value, and when that reimbursement can occur, and then provides those facilities that we believe will be TERS eligible facilities. We have the impact fee facilities, meaning in the event the city does not have capacity available for us when we need that, we will agree that we will advance those funds on behalf of the developer to the city to get those constructed. The facilities in all of those lists will be designed by the developer through funding by the developer. The city retains full review and approval rights, inspection rights, et cetera. So there is not a drain on any of your existing revenues to pay for engineering fees or other consulting fees associated with the obligation to get all that public infrastructure constructed. With that, I'm happy to answer questions. I know that's a high-level overview. We have provided a draft and happy to respond or not. There's not anything else.
I have a question, but it's
Sure.
not for you.
Okay.
It's for my staff. So if there happened to be a shortfall through any available fund, what funds would this come out of?
Mayor, if it's looking at the infrastructure in terms of the water and the wastewater, and we have a capacity and expansion, then if we were paying it, it would come out of impact fees immediately. Let's say, for example, those impact fees, if it's water and wastewater, have already been expended, then it would have to come out of a fund balance reserve of one shape, form, or another, or out of a loan or some other shape financing.
Would this be passed on? Would this like adjust our impact fees towards other, people that pay impact fees citywide? Would this be, any increase be passed on?
So at the onset, Mayor, when we come out this year and we complete that impact fee analysis and that study, these projects and this potential expansion will be considered in that impact fee. So we'll set those fees. If we go to expand the plants and we have to incur any of those expenses, then, and it's, let's say for some reason the city decides we're going to pay them and we don't expect a reimbursement from a developer, it wouldn't go back to existing projects. It would just go moving forward. We may have to change our impact fee study again, but our whole intention is anything that's going to be funded for the project will be funded by the developer, and then the rebate, not a rebate, but a credit based on the amount they've paid will be used for their impact fees moving forward.
Yeah, and kind of just, we're going to pay your then current impact fee. The only question is, are we, and as y'all recalculate the impact fee, we're either paying it or we're building facilities that then get credit against that payment. But throughout the entire term, Like I said, our preference would be just to pay your then current impact fee throughout the life of this project. But if you can't, we will pay your then current impact fee through the construction of facilities. Okay?
The challenge, Mayor, for staff right now is as we go into the impact analysis, we want to have a good handle on the total number of developments that we plan to have happen over not just a 1 and 2 year period, but over a 10-year period. We don't expect an impact fee analysis to go for a 10-year period, but we have to have a best case estimate when we're sitting down with that company to evaluate what we expect to be the overall impact to both utility services as we're moving forward, so that rate is an effective rate moving forward. So just like what Steve's saying, if they're just paying their rate, that's fine. But if Shoreline Ranch develops and then 3 other developments are going at the same time, the capacity goes from, let's just go with the number Mark said, hypothetically, 500 houses at current, it goes away very quickly if we're 300 houses a year now, for example. So theoretically, 2 years out, we're down to 0 based on current use if we're basing it off a 500 house volume allowed right now. So that's why this is critical, and that's one of the reasons, council pushed to go ahead and do that impact fee analysis and it's included in your CIP plan, which council already approved, because we know the expansion's going to happen and we know we have to expand capacity.
Right. Any more questions from the council?
Do we know how this impacts a rollback fee?
Mayor, so one of the things we were talking about last week at the TML conference is that it was reiterated a couple sessions that the TERS impacts your city's rollback rate on your tax rate and your rollback. Mayor Pro Tem, the question of how it impacts it, I do not know directly how that'll impact us now, but that's one of the things we're going to work with Steve on and doing the calculation, and we'll present that back to the council with the development agreement, and it'll be in that discussion with the county to determine it. So as I mentioned in the lead up for Joel, we wanted to get the workshop out because we know we have questions, and then we put it on this agenda. Steve showed you having it back to council for the 19th, so that's a projected consideration by council time. But this evening even, that'll give us more time for more questions if there's something else. There may not be something today, but we know that just based off Frank's 44 to 47,
yeah.
we're going to need the time to answer, but it's not going to be mostly us. We're going to hand it over to Joel's team and get the responses. But then there are the responses back to Eric, Roy, and to Aaron that we'll need to flesh out for you. So,
Right.
So I think I might have missed it in the very beginning. What's the timeline for paying back the TERS? And is it 100% of the tax improvement value going that way, or is there a percentage?
So that's one of the things that we'll make an agreement with the developer is the timeline. So as we said, we could have a 7-year period. We could have a 30-year period. Heck, we could have a 40-year period. I don't know the max, but the timeline's based on how quickly we want to pay that back. And then the amount is also part of the development agreement and the TERS development that says if the county and the city participate, then we split that amount. And then whatever that amount is what we agree upon. If they, as Mark pointed out, if they need 30 million and that equates to 100% of the new value, then we split that with the county or the city handles that. So that's all embedded in that agreement and the development. Gotcha. So that's numbers-wise, I can't tell you any of those numbers now. We can just look at what Mark's given us as a baseline, and then we'll have to work backwards.
My concern is that that neighborhood ends up needing more infrastructure spent on it before that's paid back, and that taxation's not coming into our budget.
Yeah, Mayor, I think that's a good concern that I'd hope council is going to consider, and part of that point Frank making to make sure that it all comes down to making sure that the development agreement, we've fleshed it out completely, that it's not a rushed review, and then also looking at those numbers that Mark's provided us to go over that. Eric's already looked at them, Roy and I have looked at the numbers, but that's just on a 30,000 foot review. And we're going to need to sit down more extensively and review those numbers to try and see how those numbers play out for the big picture. So I think you're spot on. That's the concerns that staff would have, and hopefully it's what our citizens will ask the same too.
It's gonna take a long time to build out anyway, right?
40 years, long-term project.
Like 2 full years, it should be done by then.
Before my end of my term?
Right, we're fast city, so yeah, a year, 365 days or so. It's be done.
Anybody else? All right, at this time, I will open it up to questions from the audience. Yes, ma'am, please come up, state your name and address for the record. No, it's protocol, sorry. It goes into our minutes, so we have to know that.
It's probably a dumb question. I'm sorry. My name is Diane Chang Yupen. And what? What was that?
Name and address.
Oh, address. I live on 18315 Lakeshore Boulevard.
Okay.
And my question was just with regard to what Steve was saying, because so much of it, when you're not in the field, so much of it kind of just gets muddled together. So my question was, in the information that you posited with regard to the plans and everything, is that written down anywhere so that us who are not in the environment can like read it and wrap our heads around the actual nits and nats?
How the TERS works?
Not just the tours, the tours, but the whole, the aspect of the tax increment reinvestment and all that financial
Yeah, we can certainly
machinations.
We can provide summaries and outlines on how it all works for distribution. We'll provide it to Josh, and then he can make it available to everyone.
Perfect.
Man, we actually have a big document that Steve presented to the council when it was first presented, that they were going to go to the state legislature when council gave approval for them to advance. And so I'm going to say we have a document basically of this depth. And in addition, I saw some people taking some notes from the slides. We have all these slides, and so we can make that.
Are they on the website?
It's not on the website, but we'll put it on the website because these guys sent them to us early. So we'll put the slides on the website, and then for the development agreement, we'll have the copy of that we can make available too. So
Okay, I printed out something when it was on the original on the meeting on the 10th that I couldn't make it to. There was information on item 1 and item 2. I printed out those that were pretty substantial, and I just glanced through them, but I don't remember seeing any detailed financial information, how the tax. Is that what you're talking about, or would you say go to the
That might have been
legislature?
something else.
Or
Mayor, I
just
think
prior
that's a
to?
different meeting on the 10th. So this one's completely separate in terms of this TERS and Shoreline Ranch. So yeah,
So that we don't have.
none of that information has been made available on the website.
And we can get it from where then?
I'll have to get it to you. So if you just give me a contact, but we'll put this presentation and the draft development agreement, we'll put that on the website. I'm not sure about putting the larger document about TERS and MUDs and districts on the website, but we can get copies of that and email that over.
Okay.
You just write down an email address and we'll make sure to get you information. Please.
Is there anyone else with questions? Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Paul Roberts at 5312 Lago Drive. I just had a couple questions for these gentlemen. Did I see somewhere in your presentation that you would have sidewalks?
That is the plan, yes, to have trails.
Okay, trails, and there would be like normal residential sidewalks along the street?
Not necessarily.
No? Okay.
I mean, some.
No, I think that the sidewalk I was talking about would be a trail.
I see, okay. Thank you for clarifying, I appreciate it. In one of the slides I heard early on, I think it was you, sir, you said, I didn't get your name, I apologize, you said 568 homes? Did I understand that correctly?
Potentially 568 available connections right now.
Available connections, okay, you were speaking as to how it's currently built out. And then, but you would go up to, on the single families, you would do 11, you're planning for 1,100 homes.
We don't know exactly, but plus or minus.
Okay.
Right.
your slide one said specifically single-family lots, 1,100, and I think it's, I saw 3. I don't know what that means. Does that mean 3 per acre? Three- That's what that means? Okay. What would the min square footage be for those homes?
The homes or the lots?
The homes that would go on the lots?
Again, this is market driven, but, you know, at this point, it depends on if we have a move down product there, you know, an empty nester product, we don't exactly know right now, but
Okay.
that's where you get a lot of variation. But the majority of them will be standard single family homes.
Okay. If you wouldn't mind going back to the first slide, I think it was the first slide or perhaps the second, that one right there that shows the purple, where you mentioned amenity center and early on in your presentation, you referenced the possibility of an amenity center going there in the purple area where you have a limited amount of lake access. And then later on, another, one of your peers had mentioned a boat dock. Where would you anchor the boat dock exactly?
We don't know. We don't know if we'll be able to have a boat dock.
Okay.
And we don't know if we have we just don't know at this point.
That's all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would it be a private or a public boat dock?
It'd be public to the extent that available to the residents in the HOA.
Right, so.
Yeah.
HOA. Semi.
Semi.
Publicly private.
What's up, Kev?
Kevin Sullivan, 3933 Outpost Trace. 2 suggestions. One, I think it'd be great, Frank's very detail-oriented, knows his stuff. Instead of hiding that stuff, your 44, once you make a frequently asked questions and post that on the website too, because I think we'd all benefit from that as you guys work through the process. And the only other comment is I noticed up there when you had the financials, you had the traffic signal at 200,000. We just put one in there at Loam and Boggy and it was 435. So just FYI. Anyway, that's all I had. Thanks, guys.
They are going up, you're right.
Thank you.
That was a 4-way intersection, right?
Yes, it was.
This is the, yeah.
Anyone else from the audience? All right. Anything else from council? Staff, anybody? Gentlemen, anything else? All right. I'm going to call this meeting adjourned at 5:20.